Mary stumbled through her front door well after 2 a.m. on Saturday, still buzzing from the night's events. Her Friday night had officially started the moment work wrapped up, as she and a group of friends kicked off the weekend at their favorite bar. The drinks flowed freely, and the hours blurred with laughter and dance until the mix of it all began to weigh on Mary. Grateful she hadn't driven herself, she knew Darren would have assumed the role of designated driver yet again, likely taking the opportunity to lecture her all the way home. Over the past couple of years, she'd grown accustomed to late nights, embracing the escapism they offered. As Mary shuffled down the dim hallway, barely able to keep her balance, her thoughts turned to her husband, most likely sleeping soundly at this hour. The idea of disturbing him brought a mischievous smile to her face, her irritation bubbling up under her tipsy grin. She headed upstairs, her steps clumsy, ignoring the guest room entirely as she made her way unsteadily to the master bedroom. By the time she finally reached the room, she was using the wall as support, managing to push the door open with her foot. To her surprise, the bedside lamp was on, but more baffling was the fact that the bed was empty. Where the hell could he be, she wondered, her legs moving instinctively toward the bathroom. A thorough search upstairs revealed no sign of him, so she descended the stairs with her heartbeat quickening. A faint light from the kitchen caught her attention, sparking the hope that he'd perhaps fallen asleep waiting for her. But as she entered, she found only the hood light over the stove illuminating the empty room, further stoking her growing frustration. He's going to hear about this when he finally gets home, she muttered angrily, her gaze falling to the clutter on the counter. She considered leaving the mess for the morning, but something shiny caught her eye. Curious, she pulled a tall chair closer and sat down to examine the object. It was Darren's wedding ring. The weight of it in her hand magnified her unease. Beneath the ring was a stack of documents, her passport, what looked like a ticket of some sort, and a sealed envelope. Glancing at her watch, 2:30 a.m., she thought about waiting for Darren to return and explain himself. With a heavy sigh, she laid her head on her arms, drifting into a fitful sleep. The mystery of his absence lingered as her eyes finally closed. She couldn't recall how she ended up on the floor, but the impact jolted her awake, her head throbbing as she glanced at her watch. 5:45 a.m. Annoyed, she realized Darren had not returned, leaving her to sleep uncomfortably at the counter. Determined to confront him, she stormed back upstairs, only to find the bedroom still empty. Now fueled with purpose, she swiftly descended the stairs again, flicking on the overhead kitchen light. She opened the garage door to find his car was still absent. With frustration boiling over, her gaze shifted back to the documents left untouched on the counter. Examining her passport, she noted the outdated photo, realizing it had been years since she'd last used it. Her curiosity piqued as she picked up the airline ticket to Florida, glancing back at the envelope with her name on it. Racing to the nightstand to retrieve her reading glasses, she returned to the counter, settling onto a stool to read the letter. Dear Mary, if you're reading this, it means you've realized I'm not home and discovered what I've left behind for you. You've likely heard the phrase "a last call" while out at bars, especially as they prepare to close. Well, my dear wife, consider this your last call. Mary's heart skipped a beat as she continued to read. I'm sure you won't be surprised to hear that our marriage has been struggling for some time now. I wish I could keep letting it limp along as it has, but I can't. We have two choices. Option 1, gather the courage to pick up these documents and meet me in Florida for an honest attempt to salvage what's left between us. If you choose this, I'll be waiting for you, and we can go from there. Option 2 is less pleasant. We end this, divide our lives, and put an end to what's become a charade of a marriage. I'd be lying if I said I didn't lean toward option 2, but since I still feel something for you, even if faint, I'm willing to give it one last shot. I won't delve into how we got here or who's to blame. I simply can't follow the path you've set for us any longer. Mary put down the letter, disbelief spreading across her face. This had to be some sort of joke. Darren would never have the nerve to actually go through with this. Any moment now, she expected him to stroll in sheepishly, ready to apologize as he always did. This is the thanks I get for going easy on him, she muttered bitterly. If he thought he could intimidate her with divorce, he was sorely mistaken. She resumed reading, driven to finish since she had already come this far. Mary, we've shared wonderful memories and raised two amazing children together. However, as the saying goes, staying together just for the kids isn't reason enough. They're grown now, building their own lives. I believe that if we're willing to make some changes, we could rediscover what we had when we first met. It won't be easy, but it's the only way to save our marriage. Damn it, Mary spat, tossing the letter onto the counter. I gave him everything, and now he says it's not enough. He's going to pay for this when he gets back. If he had any backbone at all, I wouldn't have to keep pushing him. If it weren't for me, he'd still be a lowly salesman, never climbing the corporate ladder as he has. He should be grateful, not giving me ultimatums. Frustrated, she returned to the letter. As mentioned, I'll be there to meet you at the plane, ready to begin rebuilding, if you're willing to show up. Mary's eyes darted to the ticket. 3 hours from now? He'll be surprised when I don't get on that plane, she sneered, spinning his wedding ring on the counter. As it slipped from her grasp and clattered to the floor, she left it there, feeling drained. All she wanted now was sleep. Dealing with Darren could wait. If she'd kept reading, she would have seen the consequences outlined in the letter, set to begin in just a few hours. Later that morning, nursing a coffee, Mary was startled as Darren's brothers, Frank and James, entered through the front door. "Excuse me, but you can't just waltz into my house," she snapped. "Take your time with the coffee, we're just here to collect a few things for our brother," Frank replied with a smirk. "Go ahead," she retorted. "Tell Darren he's in for it when he returns." They made several trips, gathering items in black trash bags, saying nothing more to her. "They could at least have thanked me," she grumbled, contemplating another coffee. After a late lunch, she went shopping with friends, and with Darren still absent, the night slipped into a repeat of Friday's revelry. She awoke on Kelly's couch Sunday afternoon, her headache pounding, swearing off alcohol once again, though she knew it was temporary. "Darren's probably stewing at home, wondering where I am," she thought before drifting back to sleep. But the demands of Monday morning soon loomed, and with no change of clothes at Kelly's, Mary knew she'd have to return home. As Mary stepped into the silent, vacant house, a wave of anger rose up inside her. "He can try to avoid me as much as he wants, but he won't be able to escape forever," she muttered under her breath, already scheming her next steps for when she finally cornered Darren. Sunday night passed, too quietly for Mary's taste. Lying in bed with a book, her thoughts drifted towards Darren, though, for once, not in an entirely hostile way. "Perhaps when he returns, I'll ease up on him," she considered, recalling how much he enjoyed pleasuring her. A warm, familiar feeling stirred within, not exactly love, but a satisfaction close to what she felt after Darren had brought her to climax. Mary awoke on Monday, much later than usual, with her book still in her lap. Without Darren's usual insistence to keep her on track, the morning spun into chaos, and she barely made it to work, arriving half an hour behind schedule. The day rushed by in its usual whirlwind, and it wasn't until Kelly mentioned Darren's absence that Mary's thoughts returned to him. At 10:54, a man in a suit approached her, silently handing her an envelope. "Mrs. Mary Gray, you've been served," he said simply, then turned and walked away. Mary's fury bubbled over. He'd crossed a line. "That little jerk will pay dearly for humiliating me like this," she fumed, scanning her surroundings to see who might have witnessed the scene. During lunch, Kelly and Mary went over the documents in the envelope. "He's not asking for much," Kelly commented, flipping through the 5 pages. "Half the savings, his 401k, and you get to keep the house. Looks like he just wants out." "He's not getting a damn thing," Mary shot back fiercely, her usual bitterness towards Darren surging. "By the time I'm done, he'll regret ever trying to cross me." During lunch, Mary logged into their shared online bank accounts, only to find that half of their funds were gone. When she called the bank, they informed her that Darren had withdrawn it. There was no trace of any other accounts in his name. She realized then that he'd taken the money and likely opened a new account somewhere else. On her way home from work, Mary stopped by a different bank and set up an account in her name alone. "Two can play this game," she thought, feeling resolute in her plan. Back at the house, she poured herself a large glass of wine, then went into the kitchen to retrieve the letter and other items Darren had left on the counter days earlier. With renewed interest, she continued reading his letter. Mary, if you don't board that flight, I'll take it as your answer, and what happens next is already set in motion. I've taken what I needed from the house and left only the rest of my clothes. My brothers will come by Saturday to collect anything that remains. By Monday, you'll be served with the divorce papers I prepared months ago. This is your last chance. If you aren't with me by Saturday, it's the end. I'll try to be fair, but if you contest it, things might get ugly, which neither of us wants. Our kids have known for some time that our marriage is only in name, so this shouldn't surprise them. As for our families, well, they are probably surprised we lasted this long. This is all I have to say, until we meet face to face, or not. If not, I sincerely wish you a good life, and despite everything, I hold no resentment toward you. Your husband, Darren. Mary's immediate reaction to the plane ticket and documents was a resounding fury. Thousands of miles away that Sunday, Darren lounged in a chair, engrossed in a gadget he'd bought the week before. I'm sorry, Peggy said, glancing at him. Don't be, it's mostly my fault. If I hadn't let her get her way all these years, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess. But at this point, I don't even care, Darren replied, scrolling through the books he'd downloaded. Did you really think she'd come? Peggy asked. No, but I promised my kids I'd give it one last try, Darren admitted, eyes still on the screen. You're just glad we don't need both cabins now, she teased, pulling him close and giving him a kiss laced with passion. Peggy had worked alongside Darren for a decade, witnessing the decline in his happiness. Her own husband had passed away 8 years prior, and Darren had become a supportive friend, reassuring her, listening, and offering comfort. Yet Darren wasn't always gentle, he'd sometimes remind her firmly to keep living. Your husband may be gone, but you're still here. Randy wouldn't have wanted you to give up. You're young, beautiful, and have so much to offer, he'd said, sounding almost like a different person. That memory felt like a lifetime ago. 3 years ago, Peggy had left an unsigned card with 2 simple words on his desk, thank you. Darren had known it was from her. As time passed, Peggy began to listen to his troubles as well. Although nothing physical had happened, Peggy would have jumped at the chance. Over time, they grew close, both needing the other. 9 months ago, Darren walked into work furious with Mary, her complaints, her ingratitude. Peggy watched as he reached his breaking point. Then, out of the blue, he offered Peggy a week-long cruise on the Carnival Glory. There was a catch, they'd have separate cabins. This cruise is my last try at fixing my marriage, though I doubt Mary will hold on to it, Darren confessed. If she comes, fine, but if not, I want you there to help me come to terms with the end. At the airport gate, they waited together. As the crew disembarked, Darren, with relief in his eyes, pulled Peggy into a kiss he'd clearly held back for years. I've wanted to do that for so long, he admitted, stealing another kiss before declaring they had a cruise to catch. They checked into separate cabins but spent the day exploring the ship, dining, and dancing until nearly dawn. As they settled for the night, Darren made a promise over breakfast, placing a ring on Peggy's finger. I'll take it one day at a time until the divorce is final. By the end of the cruise, Peggy suggested hiding away in the cabin to relive their moments, an idea Darren loved but new reality awaited. Their bosses expected them back Monday, but Peggy hesitated, wondering if they could stay. Darren proposed a different plan, though. How about you let me move in with you? Although tempted, Darren decided to stay with his brother for the time being. Despite Mary's outbursts, Darren remained calm, carrying his happiness like armor. The divorce was granted, and the waiting period began. Their children, exhausted by their mother's tirades, eventually urged her to reflect on her behavior, suggesting that if she'd treated Darren differently, they might still be together. Offended, Mary cut off contact with them for a month. 10 days before the divorce was finalized, Mary saw Darren's engagement announcement in the paper and sent him a scathing email. The day his divorce was official, Darren married Peggy in a small, intimate ceremony. As time passed, Darren found himself becoming happier by the day. A month later, Mary sat alone at the bar with her last few friends. The bartender rang the bell for last call, and she whispered to herself with a touch of regret, if only Mary's whispered regret hung in the air as she finished her last drink, her thoughts looping back to choices she'd made and bridges she'd burned. A pang of loneliness settled in, a feeling she'd kept buried beneath her anger and pride but could no longer ignore. She gazed around the bar, noticing couples laughing, sharing stories, and leaning into each other with a warmth that seemed almost foreign to her now. As the lights dimmed for closing, Mary clutched her empty glass, reflecting on how far her life had drifted from what she'd once envisioned. Meanwhile, across town, Darren and Peggy were settling into a cozy evening together. Darren had slowly moved his belongings into her place over the last few weeks, turning her modest apartment into a shared home. They took simple joy in the routines of daily life, cooking dinner together, taking evening walks, and talking late into the night about dreams, plans, and memories of their younger days. For the first time in years, Darren felt at peace, a feeling he realized he hadn't known since before his marriage with Mary had begun its downward spiral. Peggy could hardly believe how natural it felt, how they'd so easily slipped into the roles of partners, confidants, and companions. She'd been through her share of heartache, losing her husband and facing years of solitude, but now, with Darren, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. Darren's quiet strength and gentle humor drew her in even further. She cherished the way he truly listened, remembered little details, and made her feel seen and valued in a way she'd almost forgotten was possible. One evening, as they shared a bottle of wine over candlelight, Peggy admitted, "You know, I never thought I'd have this again, the chance to truly love someone, to share a life with someone who makes everything feel right." Darren reached across the table, taking her hand in his. "I feel the same, Peggy. Every day with you has been a gift I didn't even know I needed." They sat in comfortable silence, simply enjoying each other's presence, a wordless understanding passing between them. Darren's kids, though initially hesitant, had grown fond of Peggy. She didn't try to take their mother's place, rather, she brought a calm kindness and gentle warmth that they came to appreciate. They could see how much happier their father was, and it brought them relief to see him free from the strain that had weighed him down for so long. Their conversations with him became more open and genuine, free from the tension that used to permeate every family gathering. As the months rolled on, Peggy and Darren began to make plans for a modest wedding celebration, though they agreed it would be more about creating new memories than making a grand statement. Peggy had seen enough of the spotlight to know that genuine love didn't need to be displayed extravagantly. What mattered most was the life they were building together, step by step. They planned a small ceremony in a garden, with close friends and family, followed by a simple reception under the stars. Back at home, Mary found herself missing the sense of connection she had once had with her own children. Her anger had kept her isolated, and her relationships with those she loved most had become strained and fractured. As she replayed old memories in her mind, a wave of nostalgia and regret swept over her. She reached out to her kids tentatively, sending short texts and making small gestures, hoping to slowly mend the wounds her pride had caused. They responded with cautious kindness, though a part of her feared it might be too late to regain what she had lost. One evening, Mary received a message from her son inviting her to dinner. Though nervous, she agreed, dressing carefully and arriving early, unsure of what to expect. She was surprised to see her daughter there as well, along with their partners. The evening began stiffly, with guarded conversation and polite exchanges. But gradually, the laughter they once shared returned, and Mary felt a spark of the closeness she'd nearly forgotten. She left with a glimmer of hope, a small reminder that perhaps not all was lost. Over time, Darren and Peggy's life became filled with family, friends, and a quiet joy that grew in the ordinary moments. They found happiness not in grand gestures or dramatic declarations, but in the day-to-day rituals that formed their life together. Peggy would often glance at Darren with a warmth that spoke of a deep love and contentment, a look he returned with equal devotion. They both knew that, despite the hardships and lost years, they'd found a new beginning with each other, one that brought peace, laughter, and, finally, a profound sense of fulfillment. And as Mary sat alone one evening, recalling the fragments of happiness she'd let slip through her fingers, she understood that while her choices had led her here, she still had time to shape what came next. It wouldn't be easy, but perhaps, with patience and a softened heart, she might find her own path to redemption and, eventually, peace.